Hi, welcome. And this is the first of, I think, about 3 videos looking at all the stages from getting your online survey onto SPSS, sorting out that data, analysing that data, being ready to write up your quantitative project results section. I'm recording this for a different student group, so I'm going to use talk in a way that's going to work for everyone. And clearly you'll have your own questions that come up from watching these videos as they relate to your project. So please note down those questions and be ready to check in with me after watching these videos. Okay, so in this first video, we're going to look at downloading your SPSS dataset and doing kind of an initial tidy of that dataset. I'm going to be sharing different screens here, so this should work hopefully, looking at the relevant files I'll be looking at for just this video. So we start off downloading a dataset from an online survey, and you'll have used something like Google Forms or Qualtrics to host your survey with all its questions about gender and age and all of those scale items, those Likert scale items most of you will have been using, strongly disagree, strongly agree, with numbers assigned to all of them. That's what we need, numerical data for a quantitative project. So you're downloading that file. Now you'll either just have an SPSS data set downloaded straight directly from Qualtrics if you're using that, or you'll have a slightly fiddlier step and you'll be downloading what's called a .csv file, which looks just like an Excel spreadsheet. But that's a very simple step to just import that .csv file into SPSS. So I'm going to go through that step just now, so it's sort of done. So what you can see here that I'm showing is the .csv file. This is one that I've downloaded. This is how it will look. I've edited out any bits that might contain confidential information for the purposes of this video. But you can see, it's mainly, rows and rows and rows and columns and columns and columns of numbers. So that's what you have in your .csv file, and you can import that into SPSS in the following way. So here's a blank SPSS file that I've created. You go to File, Import Data, CSV Data. You guys might not see this screen right now, but you might do. You select the relevant CSV file. You click Open. You click first line contains variable names, and then you click OK. You should, I hope you guys can see this. Possibly you can't. Let me just check that you're seeing this one here. SPSS does funny things sometimes. There we go. You should see something just like that. It suddenly pulls in all that information that you had from the CSV file. And then you're ready to do a data tidy on this. We talk about sort of cleaning your data as the first step in organizing your SPSS data set. Now, the main thing here is to keep the information you want and to get rid of the information that you don't want. Saving versions of your data set is going to be really useful, so that you've got a log of when you've completed particular activities, and so that you don't have to start from absolute scratch. But the bottom line is you can always go back and download the raw data file from Google Forms or from Qualtrics if you're using that. There's not a cap on how many times you can download that. It's always going to be there. But to save your time, it's going to be good to save multiple versions after you've come to the end of a particular set of analyses or data tidying operations. It's just going to save a bit of your time. And sometimes you can label the files in quite useful ways. So you might have project file version 2, you know, irrelevant columns removed or something like that in brackets at the end of that document title, just so you know where you've got to with a particular phase of work, because once we open these files up, things do get quite confusing, especially after we revisit the work after a couple of days off or something. I'm going to focus now on just a basic tidying. I'm not going to go too crazy. I'm not going to do loads and loads and loads, but I'm going to do a little bit here. Now, the first thing to notice is you'll download things in a format that reflects how things were set up on Google Forms or Qualtrics. Now, that might mean that you have labels that are quite unhelpful. So this one here that I'm highlighting now, Q25_1, not hugely helpful there in terms of knowing what that was actually about, what that measurement was about. I'd have to go back to my survey, my original survey, to check the chronology, the sequencing of items, just to be sure on what each of these columns meant. In variable view, we might get some more information, but we don't here. We just have that rather unhelpful kind of number type label for each of the variables. So we've got to be a bit careful and just be sure that we know what each of the columns mean. And that's a big part of our job with data cleaning. It's stripping things down so we've got only the variables we want, only the columns we want, but it's also making sure that things are clear, that things are set out in the way that we want them. So I'm just going to do this illustratively. I'm not going to be too exhaustive here. And I'm going to start by getting rid of some columns I don't want, and then I'm going to show you a little bit about labeling, how to make that a bit clearer. So what do I want from this data set? Well, it would be useful to have at least one column that tells me something about when the response was provided. Now you can cut out variables, you can cut out columns in either data view or variable view. You can do multiple columns at the same time. You can hover over them, press right click, and clear is SPSS language meaning delete. You can also do that in variable view. Sometimes SPSS does weird things and doesn't let you delete things in data view. You can only do it in variable view. And sometimes you can only delete things after you've pressed the save button. So sometimes SPSS is a bit particular like that. It's normally more reliable to do this deleting bits in variable view, in my experience. So I'm right clicking with those and just clearing some of the variables that I don't need. I don't need any of those. So going back, you can see in data view that I've got rid and simplified the data set just a tiny bit. Now, I actually don't need any of these either. And let's just see if I can clear them here in data view. Yes, I can. That's good. I will actually keep the response ID just because that's a unique way of recognizing the individual scores. Okay. So part of the way there, one thing we'll have is some blank columns. We have those as part of our data set, and that will just be, it will reflect some particular way of how the survey was set up. One thing we can do here is remove all of those. Now this, I happen to know, is the age variable. So you can start to go in here and just organize things a little more clearly. So I've got, a few things here I could go in and change. I'd have to go in and check what these two variables are, check against my survey I was looking at first there. Here, I want to call that date rather than what I have there. I want to call that ID. What's the age variable? What's Q21? I'm going to give it a more helpful title, age. And there we are, we've made a start. So I need to check what these two are. But here I've got date, ID, age. everything the way I want it there. Now, I'm not entirely sure what some of these things are, so I'm going to move to some items where I am clearer. I'm pretty sure these are narcissism items, and we'll come on and look at the narcissism scale as an illustration in a later video. These are all narcissism items. I'm moving them up a bit in variable view, and you can select lots and drag and drop them around, which is quite handy. You might want to change the number of decimal places for variables. I like to have them all at 0, really. It's just less noise on the on data view. You're looking at fewer numbers, so I like to have them set at 0. I'm quite particular. I like a left alignment and everything, so the numbers appear on the left. See now the 2 is in the corner there on the left, rather than in the middle or on the right. That's just the way I like to look at things. But that's important, you know, get things looking the way you want them. If it's easy for you, diminishes your cognitive load, that's a good thing. Now, wherever you have data that you're going to enter into SPSS for an analysis, so descriptive statistics or multiple regression or whatever it is, it needs to be numeric data. So under type, this is in variable view, you need to have it stored as numeric data. And most of this data here is numeric data, but sometimes it will be string data. String data means text, text in each of the entries. This is actually date data, and that's string data. No, in fact, it's presented as string data there as well. It can have a date data option. Where it's string data, where it's entered as string data in type, but it's actually numbers going down here, you need to be a bit careful. So you need to be careful that you're not suddenly changing string to numeric in that panel. If you do that sometimes, that can, when you change it from string to numeric, you go to data view, look at the column, the relevant column, and suddenly you've got no data there at all. So what you sometimes need to do, and this is a bit annoying, but this is how SPSS works, you need to create a copy of that variable, copy and paste it into perhaps a notepad document, change it to numeric because that's how you want the variable to look, and then paste back the data into that column on data view from your notepad. So just be a bit careful about deleting, about suddenly changing rather string data type to numeric data type. You might need to go through another couple of stages, and again, storing, saving multiple versions of your SPSS files is going to be very useful there. It's going to diminish that risk of errors. What other things should I talk about in variable view here? Label, I tend to put the same labels. I'll only do it for these ones for now. I tend to put exactly the same thing in the label column as I have in the name column. Now that's relevant because sometimes you get information kind of hoovered in from the label bit in your SPSS output. Sometimes you get information pulled in from the name column in your SPSS output. So I just like to have the same information in both. What you could do is have kind of a detailed description, perhaps a specific scale item there. So I seldom feel blue would be a neuroticism item. You could have that written in there under label, and then, you know, neuroticism item 1 written in there. Yeah, that might be your favorite approach. Mine is to keep it super simple and just to have the bare details repeated in the same place in the name and the label column. You need to have a reference point. You need to know what neuroticism item 1 was. So you need to be able to look at some other document to see what it was. But it's up to you really how much detail you have in just in this SPSS file. Keeping it quite stripped down is my preference. It might not be yours. So figure out the way you want things to be set up. Just to say on this measure thing, this catches people out a little bit. So this looks like a very important column in variable view, it's actually really just for our own admin. It's just to kind of give us a sense very, very quickly of what kind of numerical data we're dealing with. And the options are scale, ordinal, or nominal. So, I mean, the way I use this is just to really just distinguish between scale and nominal data. So if I had a gender variable there and it was categories, I might have that as nominal. I'll leave date and ID as nominal for now, but where it's like at scale type data, I prefer to have it saying scale. Just copy and paste scale into all the relevant items. It's quicker than doing the drop down menu there. You can do things en masse for some of them. You can drag over and then just paste scale in there to all of them as well. So just playing about a bit and finding those kind of shortcuts with SPSS is quite handy. Now, we talked about these being the narcissism items. Again, I just happen to know that, but do check against your online survey to see how they were coded, so that you're sure that you're correctly labeling the relevant items in the right way. But we do need to label them somehow. We can't, just be relying on memory and thinking back and everything to know that Q25_1 means narcissism item 1. I like to use a really simple shorthand approach for labeling variables. It's just me. Work out what works for you. But that's what I like. That's how I would identify narcissism items 1 to 9, just N1, N2, N3. Clearly, if I had a neuroticism scale or another scale beginning with N, I'd need to have some thought there around my naming system. I don't want to get confused with knowing what N1 meant, whether it meant neuroticism item 1 or narcissism item 1. As it happens in this data set, I only have one scale that begins with an N, so there's going to be no ambiguity there. I'm going to call it N1 through to N9. And I'm going to copy and paste the same thing into label, just so it's really clear like that. And I'm pretty happy with how that looks. I switched back to data view, got a long way to go. As you can see from this bar, there's a lot more of the items to sort out, but that's a start. I've got these items all nicely sorted. And remember, you can adjust things so that things are the right width, the way you want them to look. You might not like this left alignment where I've got everything squashed into the left here. You might like a central one. So just think about how you want things to be set up. You're the one who's using this. You're the one who's spending lots of time with these files. So make sure that you've got things looking the way you want them. Remember to save files as often as you like. File, save as. You might not see this screen now, but you get a little location. Save things on your desktop, save things on a file structure. Try not to be reliant on the cloud. Internet connections can fail us, so try to have hard copies saved somewhere, just a bit more accessible. Yeah, so I think that's pretty much come to the end of what I want to cover in this. Clearly, it's going to be a bigger operation sorting out all of your data, but try and have that conversation with yourself about what you want to keep in the data set, and then have that kind of coding approach, that approach that's going to work for you in terms of what you're labeling things. You may want to have things just a little bit more detailed. Narc 1, 2, 3. Go beyond that, you might want to have something a bit longer like that. Figure out what works best for you, and that's all that matters really. You're the one using the data set. Have things looking the way you want them. And clearly you'll have something like that consistent for all of your different items. Okay, that's everything for now. We've talked about downloading your SPSS or CSV file from your survey platform, whether it's Qualtrics or Google Forms. We've talked about putting the CSV onto SPSS if you're using Google Forms, because you have to do that additional step. And we've talked about the initial stages of deleting particular rows, if we're in variable view, columns if we're in data view. We've also talked about the naming process, getting things looking the way we want them, having things with the label that we want for our study. You might, I'll just add this last bit on, have some incomplete data. So you might want to think at this stage which responses you want to delete. So say we want to check how many complete responses we have just looking at the narcissism 9 item. If you right click on that, this is in the data view by the way, click sort ascending, we can see where we've got missing data in the data set. So in fact, got lots of responses here, all the way down to item 53. And we've got missing data for those 53 items. That's a lot, fortunately, there's loads of items. There's 180 responses here. So we've still got the best part of 130 responses for this data set. But that's quite a nice quick way of identifying missing data and deleting those cases quickly. So I could just, having done that sort ascending, select those missing ones, because I can't do analysis on those. They're missing data for a core variable. I could right click and clear those, and they're just gone. Yeah, and then we can see we've got complete data for all the data that's there. So that's another thing. Right click, sort ascending, sort descending. That's quite handy. Okay, so that's downloading data and data cleaning covered in this video. In the next video, I'll be talking about dealing with reverse score variables, computing reliability for each of your scales, and creating mean variables for each of your scales as well. So I hope this has been useful. Send me any queries that have come from this, and see you in the next video.